pressed out and I was on mute the entire time. So, hi everyone, we are live. Sorry about that mishap there. We're live with another NCF webinar. For anyone not familiar, we have been running these every 2 weeks with popular no-code tools and platforms in the space, doing deep dives into different no-code concepts and getting overviews of no-code tools, demos, this kind of thing. This week, we're lucky enough to be joined by Mark Piller, CEO of Backendless. Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're not going to be hearing much from me during this, but I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, drop them in. We should hopefully have a time for a bit of Q&A at the end, if time permits. The format of this is that I'm going to pass over to Mark in a minute, and we're going to see a demo of Backendless in action, building an app live, and seeing some of the capabilities. So as I say, drop any questions in the chat as we go, and I'll pass over to Mark.
Thank you, Josh. Hey guys, my name is Mark Piller. I'm the founder of Backendless, and today I will be demonstrating what Backendless is in a way that hopefully will be interactive, where we will be building an application together. I will not be having and showing any slides because why would we waste this precious time on some pretty pictures when we have a platform that we've been developing for almost 10 years. And so I was thinking, what's the best way to really demonstrate the power of Backendless for someone who has never experienced it at all? And I recognize some names here, and I see there are some customers of Backendless here, and thank you for joining. So, and I was thinking, what would be an app that we can build in the time that we have? And we have about an hour, and it will probably be about 10 minutes within that hour for questions and answers. And I'm thinking that if we take something that is well known, that everybody understands, where we don't need to spend any time on the requirements and figuring out what the business logic is and so on, I think that kind of app would be a to-do app, right? Everybody, and I know everybody hates to-do apps because there is just an abundance of them, but actually building one where we can kind of go through some of the use cases and the things that need to be done, and you can see how that type of application can be materialized with Backendless, and you can start drawing parallels with what you guys are working on. Some things may become more obvious, and you can see the approach that I'm taking for some of the basic use cases to make it happen with Backendless. So as I go, I'm sure you will have some questions. Please send them to the chat pod. I will not be switching back and forth. I'll just, towards the end, we'll just go through all the questions, and if needed, I will be going back to any kind of stage of my project here, and we'll look into things further if you would like to see how they will work. To be honest, I have not did a kind of a dry run and practice this. It's going to be more of a very impromptu kind of on the go, because I think I can do it. So if there are anything that is just going off, we will use that as a good reason to do some debugging and figure out how things actually work and how we work around them. So let me share my screen, and we will jump right into it. Let me share my desktop. All right, so here we are. I'm already logged in to Backendless Console. Backendless Console is a browser-based application, which is the front end to your application in Backendless. An application in Backendless at this point consists of two parts. There's a front end, which is where you can design your UIs, and there is backend, which contains everything that you would be putting into the backend. And that includes database, file storage, user management, just everything that would be on the server side. So I will start with a brand new app, and for this you click Create App. And here, if you when you are starting, you can pick one of the templates, and these are ready to go apps. We will not be using them. We'll actually be going with a blank app, and let me call it My To Do. Whenever you create an application in Backendless, a couple of things to notice. Then you get your own subdomain name, which is going to be the URL that your application can be addressed in Backendless, and you get like a choice of 5 different URLs. You can pick one. They're not very critical, because if you need to, you can map your own custom domain to your application. There are 2 hosting zones. There is one in North America, which is actually right here in Dallas. I'm in Dallas, Texas. And there is another one in EU. So if you are concerned about GDPR and you need to host your servers, well, our servers in Europe, you can pick the European Union cluster. So type in your app name, click create, and an application is going to be created. A database will be allocated, file storage, just everything that needs to happen is going to be created in Backendless. So, and I think I have, so I have a couple of apps that have expired. Let me do this. What I will do is I will actually log out and log in with some other account that doesn't have as many apps. And let me just pick one right here, because I will not go into that story. So here we are. I don't have that many apps here. Let me create my to-do again and click this. So what happened here, since I have a system level account that opens up quite a bit of capabilities that are not released yet. For the demo purposes, I basically changed it to the regular account, and then some rules were kicked in that did not allow me to create a new application. But at this point, we have this app that is called My To Do, and that's what we're going to be working with. So let's think about the to-do application. A to-do application, in the most trivial sense, it's a list of tasks, and every single task would have task name and an indicator whether the task is done or not done. And of course, there could be a lot of different bells and whistles, such as due date or someone who is responsible for it, or we could have an authentication where you log in and you can see a list of your own tasks. Those are some additional things that we might be adding. Let's see if we will have time. So normally, when we approach a project where we need to build an application, let's say when we do it in the consulting services, or what we recommend whenever customers approach us and ask, how do we go building it up? We start with user experience. So I believe that understanding what your application is going to look like first is the most critical part in the application development process. And this is the user experience first approach. And there are different schools of thought. Some people say, don't worry about user experience, start figuring out your database schema first. There are pros and cons to these approaches. We recommend starting with the user experience first. Since we don't have a lot of time, everyone can get an idea what the to-do app should look like. A list of tasks, done, not done, kind of check marks and so on. So from that perspective, let's just skip user experience. We will build one or different versions of it within this presentation. And let's just jump to the database schema. So anything and everything related to the database in Backendless is going to be getting a lot of noise. Thank you. So everything and anything related to the database in Backendless is going to be on the backend section, which is where we are. And if you click on data, then you're going to be entering the database. And since we created the blank app, the database is empty. There are no data tables. There is really nothing in there. So let's start creating our data table, which will store information about our to-do items. For this, click this plus. We will create it the table. Let's call it to-do items. Click create. Table is created, but now we need to define the schema. What is schema? It's essentially the structure of your table. And for a table in Backendless, the structure will identify specific columns or properties that your table consists of. If you're not familiar with the terminology, think about a Google sheet or Excel spreadsheet. A table is going to be your sheet, and then the columns in the table are the columns in the spreadsheet. So it's very similar. More powerful, of course. So here, let's define our columns. So the first column is going to be task name, which will contain the values of the tasks that we will be creating. So task name, the type is going to be string. There are a lot of different types to choose from. String is the one that makes the most sense. The maximum length is 250 characters, which is plenty. and we can click create. So now we have this task name column in there, and let's add another one, and let's call it done. And for that, we will use Boolean, and that column will indicate whether our task is done or not done, which is the basic function of any to-do app. These are just various visualization properties where you can choose how it's going to be visualized within Backendless console itself. If you don't like one that you selected, you can always go back and modify it. I think we can go with this yes, no for now, and click create. And at this point, the table, in the most trivial sense for a to-do application, is done. In fact, if we go to data browser, we see this done and task name and some other system level columns in there, and we can just start populating with some data. Of course, the end goal will be is that we have the actual application that we can use to start populating with data. Normally, whenever you start working on actual UI and implementing it, having some simple data is always a good idea, because there is going to be something that you can play with. For now, let's add a few to-do items. So for here for task name, let's say it is going to be shopping. By the way, notice that for done, it shows null, which is something that I have overlooked, and that is the default value. So for Boolean values in Backendless, there are three actual values. There's true, false, and null. And null could indicate that it's neither done nor not done, which doesn't really make sense. In our case, it makes sense for some other applications, but let's fix this and go back to schema, select this done column and go into editing. And you can see this default value. How about by default, it is false, meaning that that task is not done. Click update. And now if we go back and create another task, how about it's going to be a workout, press return. Notice that the default value now is no. So that's what we have just modified. And here we can just click on this and it modifies to no. So now we have two tasks. They are in the database. And with Backendless, whenever you have a table, even if you have not defined your own schema, it will have some system columns. The API to work with that table is automatically created. It basically just comes out of the box. So at this point, just simply by creating this table, we get a complete set of APIs to retrieve data from that table, to create new items, to modify items, delete. So everything that you can do with your data conceptually is now possible with the APIs. And in fact, you can play with those APIs and see what the requests are going to be structured like, what the responses look like from the REST perspective. And I'll describe what REST is. You can do it right within Backendless console. Some people may prefer to use something like Postman. And Postman is a tool that gives you an ability to work with the APIs. I'll talk about Postman in a second. For now, let me show you what's built in. So if you go into REST console, and in here, you get a visual interface that you can use to run queries and send requests for your data in this specific data table. In the most primitive request would be retrieving data from that table. In fact, if you click get, you get this response, okay? If you're not a developer and you're wondering what this means, what you're looking at is a JSON document, and these square brackets indicate that this is a collection of data. The curly brackets right here, they group this thing into what we call an object, and this object contains properties. The most important thing is that we have properties such as task name and done. And Joshua, if you could just perhaps mute some people so we're not distracted, that would be great. So here we have a couple of columns that the columns that we defined that actually carry this data. So from the API perspective, whenever you integrate with Backendless database, the API is there, and then with this REST console, you can actually see what it looks like. In fact, we can, for the GET request, fetches data, you can get full URL. In fact, you can copy this URL, and then if you go into a browser and just put this URL in here, now we just executed an API request outside of Backendless console, simply just by sending a request to Backendless. What this means is that if you're using Backendless, or if you will use Backendless just from the backend perspective, and you want to use some other tool to build your UIs, and there are plenty of those out there, at this point, you already have the APIs that you can use to do that integration. Of course, there are pros and cons to do that. We can discuss that in the Q&A session. But at this point, we know we can fetch data. We can modify the request where, for instance, if we don't want all the columns, but we want only specific columns, you click on this, columns and properties, and you say, well, I'm interested in done, and I'm interested in task name. Okay, click get, and you get now a prettier or more compact response where it includes this done and task name. This one is included there automatically all the time, simply because when you use our SDK, and we provide libraries for JavaScript, for Android, for iOS, for Flutter, for .NET, and using those SDKs, you can work with a backend to run those queries, communicate with the backend. This property is used by our SDK, so we include it in there unconditionally. There is a way to strip it out, and if you're interested, I will show you how to do that. It is also possible. But the point of this is that you can start customizing what the actual request looks like. And then when you selected these properties, notice that the actual request URL got modified as well. Now we have these property parameters that dictate to Backendless what needs to be returned. Again, if we copy this URL and then put it in the browser, and notice that exactly the same response we're getting outside of Backendless console. So the actual customization of the API request is done within Backendless console in here. Okay, if we were to have a lot of data, let's say your database has grown to have hundreds of thousands or millions of records, which is not a problem for Backendless at all. There is a concept that is built into the platform that is called paging. And paging is the concept that allows you to start sort of chunking the responses where you get not the entire data set, but only a chunk of it. And that's going to be a page. Why do we do this? For several reasons. Number one, it is performance. Retrieving millions of records in a single call is expensive, and it will take a lot of time for the actual data retrieval from the database, transmission over the network. And since you're building mobile and web applications, speed is very important. It is important primarily for user experience for your users. And not a single human can consume more than, I don't know, maybe 50, 100 records at a time. Therefore, retrieving that much data just to show it on the screen so users can do that infinite scroll, it is inefficient. With paging, you can achieve this infinite scroll in a more elegant manner, where if the user approaches, let's say 80% of what has been loaded, you can make another request from the UI and preload additional block of data using paging. And then with paging, if you click on this, right now we have only 2 records, so you will not be able to see the effect of this. But using the paging UI here, you can customize that request. And again, the request URL will be updated automatically. Okay, sorting is built in. So for instance, if we want to sort it by task name, okay, and because right now you see we have workouts coming first and then shopping coming second. So if we sort everything by task name and then run the request, I think the sorting order here, there you go. So it needs to be like this in the ascending order. So and by clicking this, you can change the direction of the order, and this is going to be descending. You see DESC was added to the URL. You click get, and that's going to be descending order. So that's also possible to change to specify sorting and modify whether it's ascending or descending. All right, then the question is, well, how do we insert a new record? And for that, there is an API, of course. And for this, we can just take one of these objects, put it in here in the request body, okay? And if we were to use I believe the put request, that creates a new record in there. So what it did, the put request sends this request and says, okay, take this object and put it in a database. I should have modified the task name, because at this point, we have two workouts. In fact, if we go to data browser, notice we have a workout. Okay, how about we change it to something like swimming? And the question is, well, how do we enforce that there are no duplicates? Okay, because one, you could just write some extra code and say, okay, we'll check if it is unique. But you could actually rely on Backendless to make sure that the task names are unique. And for this, if we go to schema, and for task name, you see there is a column that says constraints. And in constraints, we can say it is going to be unique value. Okay, so it created that constraint that the value is unique. And if we go to REST console and we just try to put this workout in there again, keep in mind that we already have workout. So click put, and we get an error back saying that there is a duplicate value. So now database enforces the rule that the task name is unique. Okay. If you need to, so once, let's just change it to something else. Play with kids. Okay. And put, so now it is saved in a database, and notice that it automatically assigned the value for the created property. It assigned unique object ID. Those are the things that are built into Backendless. And now, of course, copying this URL and putting it in the browser will not work, because whenever you put a URL in the browser, what it does is it really just does a GET request, which is fetching data. Put request has this body, so it needs to be formatted differently. And in here, you can click this icon, and you can specify how to export or how to format the request. And if you're using CURL, which is a command prompt, you can just copy and paste this block of text, and that becomes the full command. Sometimes it is useful whenever you start integrating an external tool with Backendless. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to work with those APIs. Of course, the best way is to go read the documentation, which very few people do, and most of the people just come to support forum and ask questions, which is also fine, because if something is already documented, we will just point you back to the documentation. Anyway, so we have 4 items in our to-do list, and at this point, it is good enough to actually start building UI, which is going to be our actual application. When it comes to UIs, there are multiple options here. Of course, you can use an external tool to build UIs. Again, plenty of those. There are plenty of no-code tools. You know all about them. I'm pretty sure every single tool that you can think of that we will already integrate with, for the reason that if those tools support integration with external APIs, APIs are there, so you should be able to integrate with it. But or you can just start writing your own application. It could be native app, JavaScript app, whatever. We provide SDKs that make things easier, or you can just go with the REST API and integrate with that. Additionally, there is a UI development capability that is built right into Backendless. And let me demonstrate how that would work. So for this, if we switch to front end, and by doing so, we end up in an interface that is called UI Builder. So UI Builder is a UI development capability in Backendless. And in here, you can start creating your UIs. They can be customized pretty much infinitely with CSS and less. So you need to know, or at least learn, how CSS styling works. And there's a bunch of components. So it's a very well-known and understood model of building UIs, although there are some things that are done in Backendless quite differently. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. So Backendless UI Builder produces a React application. That React application can be embedded into a native wrapper. We provide a native wrapper that can be built into native Android app, or it's going to be more of a hybrid Android app, hybrid iOS app. You can publish it into an app that we already have in the App Store that is called Backendless Viewer. This way, you don't need to go through the publishing process. Your application would basically just appear in Backendless Viewer. You can download Backendless Viewer from app stores. That's something that we provide. The same application would also run as a web application. In fact, right from here, you can change the just the form factor for your application to preview what it looks like. But let's just start creating our to-do app. There are different ways to create this to-do app. The simplest way, which is kind of quick and dirty, which is good enough for demos, and sometimes it actually works. And I see that component being used throughout a lot of different applications that customers build. But the simplest way to do this is to use this data table component. So drag it out here, and let's select our, and this component is sort of like a grid component that has a lot of different bells and whistles to work with your data. Let's select the table that it's going to work with, and it's going to be to-do items. It automatically fetched all the columns. We can customize what these columns are because we do not need a lot of them. So for instance, we do not need object ID, owner ID, updated. Those are the system level columns. We'll put task name first. So it's going to be task name, done, and when it was created. And you can specify whether this column will be searchable, editable, sortable, filterable. The created does not need to be, well, it cannot be modified, so it's not editable anyway. Click apply. So we have these columns in here. And for the page title, we can say that it is my to-do. And at this point, it's pretty much done, right? I know it was too quick, but let's select this table and then also specify that we can allow adding data, editing, deletion, and you can enable drag and drop for columns and so on. But let's just see how it works with this minimal changes, because all we did is really just drag and drop one component, connected it to the table, and we already have something. Let's see what that something is and what it looks like. And for this, you can go into the this icon right here, desktop preview, click on it, and it runs this page. You get this banner whenever application is in the trial, which is what it is for this kind of app. Just miss it. And as you can see, we already have this our to-do app in here, because we can start editing, swimming, just have a pool swimming, and then click, and now it is updated. You can, for instance, delete shopping. Yes, I'm sure. So it is deleted. You can create a new task, conduct a demo. Let's say it is not done. Click on this. So it is a complete functionality of to-do that we got simply just by dragging one component. And we can start customizing this as well. But not only this, something else that really just comes at no extra cost because it is built in is the capability of the real-time database. I haven't mentioned this, but Backendless database is real-time. So to demonstrate the real-time capability, I'm going to run Firefox, start browsing, and I will take this URL and copy it here. Let me just make this window a little bit smaller. And here's my Firefox, and I will run exactly the same app in my Firefox and open them side by side. Now, here's something that I'd like you to see. So we have, this is Firefox, this is Chrome. Let me get rid of this banner. And let me modify this one. So let's say rather than play with kids, I'll say check kids' homework. All right, so watch this. As soon as I press this save icon, watch what happens in a different browser. So save. Now, check it out. The other browser got updated automatically, which is pretty cool, given the fact that we didn't have to do absolutely anything. And if I share this URL with all of you, everyone can just start working on my to-dos, because it's going to be shared application, and this way, and it's not just creation, I think it is deletion as well. So if I delete workout, the workout got deleted. So it's complete synchronization between two separate browser instances that are connected to the same data table. You can add your own logic for this synchronization. It's not just with this data table. If you build your own UI builder applications, then you can start adding your logic for, to get a callback when the new object is added or modified or updated or updated or deleted. So all of that capability is not just built and baked into this data table component, it is provided to you as a framework to add your own logic. And let me just put it back right here. And in fact, if you are not interested in the real time, because it may not be for everyone, all you need to do right here for this data table component selected, you will see that there is a checkbox. I'm trying to see where it is. Enable real time. So if you disable it, that's it. And this application will not be listening for any of those events that occur whenever data is created, updated, or deleted. In fact, for the changes that we have made, we deleted workout, we changed play with kids to check kids' homework. If we go to backend, you will see that the database shows exactly where it is and what it can do. Okay. Now, let's go back to front end. And as I said, this was the quickest way to do this. However, you may have your own way to visualize the data, right? It may not necessarily work for you to use this specific data table component. And that's what typically happens. You may have a tile layout or whatever the layout is. And I will demonstrate, and I'll try to do it as quick as I can, given that I have about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes left, how you can go about building more custom UIs. And for this, I will create a separate page. So this is a single page. You can create multiple pages, and I will call this to do. You can call it whatever. There are also different page templates that you can choose from. And right now, it's going to be just a blank page that I'm creating. And for this blank page, what I want to do is I just want to fetch data from the server, and I want to render my task name and whether it's done or not done. So for this, I will use a block component, and block component can be marked as a repeater. Okay, and then a repeater basically means that whatever layout, whatever data that I put in here is going to be used as a template. When I fetch data, I can assign that data to be the data model of this repeater, and it will automatically just replicate its contents, this template, for individual records that I get from the database. And for this, first of all, the block component follows the flex box layout. So I will change the direction to this, and I will add a text component in here, and I will also add a check mark, which will be right here, checkbox, to indicate whether it's done or not done. And let's spread those components in the block a little bit, just so they are not crunched together. And align items, it can be like this. And also, there you go. I think let's just go with this for now. It's not going to look beautiful, but at least it will work. So for this block component, I already marked it as repeater, and let me assign ID my to-dos. Okay, and for the most part, it is done. However, well, actually, let's fetch some data and see what happens, and incrementally make those changes. So for the page itself, I can go into the logic, and then whenever page is entered, whenever it is rendered, we can add some logic. So what you're looking at right now is an editor that is called codeless editor. In UI Builder, adding any kind of logic is done without any coding. It uses a visual programming paradigm that we call codeless. And with codeless, you can pretty much describe any kind of logic that you can think of, because it is a complete, I think, Turing machine that has all the individual properties of a programming language through the visual perspective. So in codeless, you operate with blocks. There are different kinds of blocks. Like, for instance, in logic, you can create conditionals, assignments, check values. For working with objects, different blocks. Don't try to learn it right now. It's a lot. There is actually a course in our YouTube channel where you can learn how codeless works. But for every single API that Backendless has, there is a block that can execute that API. So for right now, what I want to do, I want to use data API, and I want to load table objects. Retrieve data from database. So I use this load table object, And the name of the table, I'm going to cheat, use this API. It's going to be to-do items. I kind of forgot what it was. So the table name is going to be to-do items. So I'll be retrieving all the to-do items from my table. And then I need to assign the data that I get. So this returns data, returns a collection of items. I need to assign these items to my repeater, okay? And for this, there is a repeaters section, and I can use this block set repeater data, and I can connect to this. All right, so at this point, what's happening is this block, and with Codeless, you read it pretty most of the time, you read it right to left. So we load table objects from this table, we get those objects, and we assign these objects as the repeater data, okay? And at this point, it will work. It will not work fully, but at least we will see the effect of getting that data. In fact, let's just add a little bit of a visualization here, such as we'll add a border because we want to see how this particular block gets replicated, okay? Actually, no, let's just not worry about it. So let's just run this page and see what happens. All right, so what happened here is it got replicated down this way. So we need to change the direction. I think the direction needs to be, actually, what I want to do is I want to add another block in there that it will also get replicated. Let me add this block in here, and this text and this block will use this direction, and the text, I will move it inside of this, and checkbox, I will also move it inside of this, all right? And then this block, I can say that it's going to have some width dimensions, about 500 pixels, all right? So let me rerun it. Messed it up again. This needs to change the direction from top to bottom. All right, so as you can see, we have these 3 text and checkbox. So our template got replicated, but the data doesn't show up. So let's fix this. In fact, just to make it more, a little bit better aligned, like this. And the text that we have needs to get this data from somewhere. So in UI Builder, getting the data from somewhere typically results is done through the concept of data binding. And for this, if we go to the logic for the text component, in here, these are the various properties and events that are supported by that specific text block. And then the content logic would need to be the property of where it gets that data. And for this, it will be getting the data from the property called task name. And I will demonstrate, perhaps, just by showing what the response looks like. So, but here, if we put task name, and then for the checkbox, we'll do the same. Select checkbox, go into logic, and then checked state is going to be done, the property called done. So now by having these data bindings, if we rerun our page, you see that we get this visualization. So we get the actual task name, we get this, the checkbox, I guess the label checkbox needs to go away. And in fact, if let's select one of them to be done, let's say we conducted a demo, right? So it is done. And if we rerun this page, then conduct demo has the selected checkbox. So as you can see, that data binding is working. Of course, it looks absolutely ugly because we haven't done any styling or anything, but it is already in there, okay? And that's basically the process of retrieving data now with the logic and binding it to specific components. If the whole data binding thing was confusing, here's what we can do. We can open up inspect, which is available in all browsers, and then select network, rerun this page. In here, you will see that there was here's the API request to get data, okay? This is the data that we got. that codeless block that we had got. And this is what was fetched. So what happens here is each individual block that we have in here now is being replicated for each element in the response. And there are 3 elements. And inside of this block, we're basically binding the text label to this property task name, and we're binding the checkbox to the property done. And that's how that visualization happens, okay? And of course, we're just scratching the surface. There is a lot more in there. Creating custom components, visualization, creating the layouts, and so on. So it's way more that can actually be squeezed in a single demo. Okay, skinning and styling, that's just a complete separate area that can get very, very rich. So for instance, if you go to theme and you select library, there are some themes built in, and you can just modify the theme and preview what your page would look like. So this is the and then install. So if we install this and then rerun it, then our page all of a sudden just looks different with a different theme that is applied onto your page. And you can customize pretty much every single thing for every single component. And you can create your own custom components too, that we're working on very complete documentation that describes how to go about this. So I know that I'm running out of time. So let's see what we have as far as questions, and let's look into that. And if there is time, I can show you some more. So checking the questions. So one question is, can you please talk about what integrations are possible? I have a use case where I want to read write to Google Contacts and Mail. So as far as integrations with external services, there are 2 different approaches. One of them, which will be perhaps simpler but may cost more, is Zapier or Integromat. So Backendless Backendless database, and a little bit more than database, also push notifications, and I think email delivery and user registration, user logins. Those events are fully integrated with Integromat and Zapier. So if you need to do read write to Google Contacts, so for instance, someone registers in Backendless and you need to replicate the data in Google Contacts, then Zapier and Integromat would handle it nicely, just because you do not need to write any extra code to do this. Same thing for email. You want to send out an email, you can actually do it right from Backendless. Let me show you. If you go to Backend and select messaging, in here you have a section called emails. You can create your completely customized emails, and you can just create different templates. What you have here is an HTML email. So if you go to source, you can modify it, include images, and make them visually very, very appealing. And there is an API for email delivery. So if you need to hook into email distribution, you can do it from codeless, you can do it from code, from our SDKs. So that is part of the platform. If you want to integrate directly with Gmail through Zapier or Integromat, that's also possible. All right, so someone asked that they would like to hear about push notifications. So as far as push notifications, since we are here on the messaging screen, if you select push notifications, it's very rich and I would say complete functionality for delivering push notifications to Android and iOS. For Android, it goes through FCM, Firebase Cloud Messaging. For iOS, it goes through APNS, Apple Push Notification Service. What you can do is you can create your push template, and then here, hello, whatever, just any text, right? And you can see the preview of that right here. And you are the winner, whatever it is. So you can basically see what that would look like as a preview. You can specify who gets these notifications. You can do segmentation and just provide a condition for the users that need to get this message, or you can send it out to a specific messaging channel. Whenever device registers, it can specify the messaging channel. You can have multiple messaging channels in Backendless, so you can do the segmentation. There is a bunch of different options where you can say that it needs to have buttons, and sometimes reply or delete, whatever the buttons are. And you get the preview of these buttons. So these are buttons is the configuration. So the point is that you can specify various configuration options, badges, images, animations, whatever, and then save this template. Once the template is saved, there is API. I don't have any templates that are saved. There is an API to send out a push notification with whatever you configured. And you can, by the way, as far as the text, it can be what we call it smart text. So you can specify that you want to, add user name. So for instance, and it uses this template variable, and which will be substituted by Backendless to create more customized emails for individual users. And then with a single line of code or a single block in Codeless, you can schedule that push notification delivery. We have installations of Backendless where we do deliveries to millions of users. So the system has been tuned to provide ultimate performance. In fact, speaking of just tuning and performance, when the company was started, one of the founding principles for Backendless was to provide scalability out of the box. Functionality, of course, it is important, but we wanted to make sure that when you start with Backendless, if you have a single user or you grow to millions of users, the performance will remain the same. The performance, stability, scalability, you should not see any difference in terms of how your application functions as the size of your data grows, as your user base grows. And that's so the whole idea of scalability is baked into our architecture. And that is very important because creating an MVP that looks pretty and you just you launch it, it's great and it saves some time to demonstrate what you're wanting to do. Once you start growing, if that system doesn't scale, you'll have a lot of unhappy users, and you will have to start re-engineering your solution. Anyway, with Backendless, you get this guarantee out of the box as soon as you start working with the system. So that's push notifications. If you don't care about templates and you just want basic notifications, if you go to messages, in here, you can just specify the message, set some headers, and send this message, and it will go out as a push notification as well to your users. Okay, so hopefully this gives you an idea about push notifications. So next question. I was going to ask about integrations and if there are any ways to easily load any apps into lower code servers like AWS and Azure. Is this meant to compete with something like an Adalo or Bubble? So Backendless, there are two questions here. So can it run on AWS or Azure? The answer is yes. Backendless technologically as a stack does not have any coupling to any hosting environments. It can run anywhere where Docker and Kubernetes runs. In fact, it is one of our business models is we provide licensing to the Backendless platform that you can configure and run on your own servers, whether they are in the cloud, AWS servers, or Azure, or your own physical hardware. You can run Backendless there. And so that, yes, that is definitely possible. And then the question is this meant to compete with something like Adalo or Bubble? I believe if you are looking into the UI development capability, yes, it is definitely an alternative that provides a lot of benefits. Like for instance, you notice that I dragged and dropped, I didn't have to do any kind of wiring of integrating with endpoints that the backend provides. That is just done automatically. And with Bubble and Adalo, you will actually have to spend time of wiring each and every endpoint into your application if you were to integrate Bubble with Backendless. Of course, if you do everything in Bubble, it's in there, but the concept and the approach is very different. With Bubble, if you remember here when I created the table, it automatically got its API. And that API is accessible from anywhere, from Backendless itself or from any external tool. With Bubble, you do not get that API because all the rendering and everything is happening whenever you send the request. So you do not get nice API for their database. And same thing with Adalo. So conceptually, the solutions are very different. But as far as being able to accomplish one thing, either entirely in Backendless or entirely in Bubble, yes, you'll be able to. The result is going to be different because here you can run it with 100,000 millions of users over there. I'm not sure. In fact, I know the answer, but I'd like you to find out and figure it out for yourself. My recommendation is for something that will need to grow beyond MVP. Do your analysis and figure out whether it can, if you're not doing it in Backendless. Let's see, is there Figma integration in your roadmap to convert the UI to code and connect to the backend? I'll answer it this way. In our roadmap, no, because there are people out there who already do it, and they do it rather well. If you look into a company called Bravo Studio, maybe it's the product name, Bravo Studio, but if you just Google Bravo Studio, they focus just on that, taking Figma and generating a project that can fully integrate with Backendless. And it works rather well. They have done a couple of demos with some of the blueprints that we have provided, and it's working quite well. So we'd rather focus on the core functionality of Backendless. And as far as that kind of integration, I would leave it to other people who can do it better. How would your backend interact with API automation services? So if, and there are some examples here like AutoCode and Pipedrive. So generally speaking, if there is an external service and if it has APIs, then our backend would integrate nicely, because we can communicate with anything and everything that exists out there, either with code or with codeless. Like for instance, with codeless, if I go to the same front end, well, actually, you talked about backend. So in backend, if you go to Cloud Code, and then here you can create API services, or you can create timers that run every so often on any kind of schedule. In fact, the scheduling capability is just it's amazing. So here, if we create codeless timer, and we say that it needs to run, every 200 seconds, or it needs to run, you can specify the cron expression, or you can say it runs daily every 2 days, or it, like if it runs monthly, every February and March on, 3rd and 19th, or you can say every February and March on the 1st and 5th Wednesday of every month. So that's how you create timers. And then by giving it a name and saving, you get your timer that you can design the logic for. And then speaking of integration with external services, there is a block that is going to be in the network API. So in here with this, you can connect to any resource out there. So if you just want to, kick off a workflow in some automation service somewhere else, and they have an API, that's how you can do it. So yes, it's definitely possible. Each individual integration would need to be looked into separately, just because they may have their own quirks of how it works. But generally speaking, it is not a problem. All right, next question. Can we set up a project from any part of the world? And can you talk about the charges for different parts of the world? Whenever you create an application in Backendless, and that's what I started with today. And let me just go back to that pop-up. So right here, this is the pop-up for creating a new application in Backendless. Right now, there are two hosting zones. One is in North America, the other is in Europe. And whenever you are somewhere else, where, let's say you're not in North America, you're not in Europe, the best way to do this is create an app. Anybody can create an app. Every single app that you create starts in a 30-day free trial. And as far as the pricing, we can talk about it. So there is a 30-day free trial. Create an app in America. See how fast it works. Test your loading speed. Do the same thing for Europe. Just find the one that works better for you from wherever you are. and that would be the hosting zone that you will need to go with. So that would be my answer. All right, so question is, why does Backendless delete apps that don't have activity just for a month? I have used many other cloud services. I have never seen such a rule anywhere. I believe that inactivity, there is such a thing. We do delete applications that don't have any activity, and then the activity is determined by the following factors. There are no API calls, and developer hasn't logged in. And we see it as a stalled application. And I believe we wait for 2 months. And whenever it happens, we send out an email to developer, letting them know we will delete your application because we believe it is stalled, and we give 2 weeks. And then we send out another email saying, we haven't heard from you. We will delete this application within 48 hours. And we still haven't heard, or there's no activity. We delete this application. Why do we do this? Because people create a lot of applications, and they allocate database storage, file storage. They use our resources. We're not Google or Microsoft. We are still a smart company. We don't have huge funding. In fact, we don't have any funding. Okay. So we have to be very responsible with the resources that people allocate where we don't generate any revenue. And typically, if you create an application and if it is stalled, it's going to be free, right? You're probably going to be switching to Springboard plan that you got through missions and don't do anything. So for us, those resources are precious. And that's why we believe that if someone is not using the app, we give them plenty of time and chances to indicate that there is activity. All you need to do is log in, make an API call, boom, that application is active. But if not, then we delete it. So hopefully that answers your question. And that's it. There are no more questions. So, and I think we're just right on time, a little bit over. So
Awesome.
If there is anything else. All right, so someone is asking the name of the software to convert Figma, right? Google Bravo Studio, B-R-A-V-O, Bravo Studio.
Nice. Thank you, Mark. That was awesome. Really interesting. A lot to take in. Already there's another question that's just brought in. Do you have any plan for academia?
So we don't, and there are a few reasons for that. Number one, in Backendless, whenever you start with Backendless, let's talk about pricing a little bit, because I think it's one of the things where we do things differently. Whenever you start with Backendless, you are in a 30 days free trial of our most expensive plan. At the moment, there may be other more expensive plans in the future. So during these 30 days, you get a chance to play with the platform, figure out whether it's free or not. The best way to learn Backendless whenever you're getting started is you will see this button that says missions. So if you go in there, you'll be greeted by saying, welcome to Backendless missions. You can watch this video where you will see me talking about, what missions are. Click begin quests, and there are 2 starter packs, one with code, one with codeless. So if you're not a developer, you're not interested in coding, then start with codeless. So select this, click go, and you get this interface that has this kind of, bunch of errors, bunch of blocks. And what these are, each individual block is a mission. A mission consists of multiple tasks, and then these tasks, as you go and progress, will become more and more complex. Each individual task will ask you to do certain things in Backendless, okay? There is going to be either a set of instructions that demonstrate what needs to be done, or there may be a video, such as here, that demonstrate what needs to be done. As you progress through these tasks, you will actually be working with Backendless and executing various tasks that developers do in Backendless. And this way you will learn how it works. And then at one point, like by the time you get here, you will unlock a plan that we call Springboard. Springboard plan is free. It does not have any ongoing cost. But unlike many other companies that have free plans, then they just give it away. Hey, jump in our free plan. We made it differently, and the free plan needs to be earned by going through missions. And this way, the benefit is that you learn how the system works. You unlock the free plan. Now you have this free plan to develop your application. The Springboard plan is great for development. It is not that good for production. This actually will not work for production purposes when you have a lot of users or even small number of users. So it's strictly just the kind of development sandbox. So this way, this is how you can unlock the free plan. As far as the discounts, academia, and so on, our pricing plans start at $35 per month. For the functionality that the platform provides, I believe it is greatly undervalued, even for academia, okay? Because by looking at the university budgets, $35 a month for one application, it is absolutely nothing. You guys spend way more money on, toilet paper and, plastic cups. So, and for us, it is important. We generate revenue to provide great service. So for that reason, we don't provide any discounts to academia and nonprofits and so on, because we believe that our prices are already way too low. They really need to be more expensive, but right now that's where they are. And for that reason, we don't provide discounts to academia. And that was the last question.
If there are any more questions, we have a Backendless channel in the Slack where the team are available to answer questions asynchronously. So that's the tool-Backendless channel if you are a member of Slack. Also, this has been recorded, as you're probably aware, so we're going to be sharing this next week in our newsletter in case you've missed anything or want to recap on a lot of the information that Mark went into there. So I will say thanks to Mark for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. We will be hosting another webinar like this in 2 weeks' time. We've not officially announced that yet, but we'll have one on Notion, and then we're going to have another one after that on Web3. So check out our newsletter for that. I'll be announcing those next Wednesday. That's pretty much it from me. But thanks for joining us. If you do have any more questions, drop it in the Slack and or these support email addresses that Mark just dropped into the chat. And that's it. Thank you all. The recording is going to be made available next week, so it'll be shared in next week's newsletter, which usually goes out on Wednesday.
Thank you, Josh. Cool. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
No problem. Thanks.
All right. Bye.